What is up, YouTube? It is Coach Kolton again, here to bring you physique development tools, skills, and opinions that hopefully you can use for yourself to make some gains. Yes, I pierced my ears. Don't hate me for it. Let's talk about digestion. In this video, we are going to be covering the topics of off-season digestive issues. Now, this happens a lot when you're pushing food. You've probably seen the last video, so hopefully you've titrated your calories up to a level in which is quite a lot of calories and you're not obese, but you're putting on some healthy weight. Now, at this point, you've ran into some issues where you just don't have the appetite, you're bloating, you're uncomfortable, it just feels like food doesn't really work anymore. I'm going to cover all the topics that you need to know to make sure that your digestion is on fire throughout the off season. Let's go. So why would we really be focused on digestion in the off season? Well, quite frankly, it's pretty obvious, right? If you're not digesting the food in what you're eating, those amino acids aren't getting to the muscle, those carbohydrates aren't getting to the blood. We've seen this in plenty of practical applications within studies and data that show under physiological stress and gastrointestinal distress that blood glucose values don't rise as opposed to times in which there was not gastrointestinal distress. So you're consuming all this protein, you're spending all the money on your food, but it's not actually being used by your physiology, you're just kind of putting it out the back end. Gastrointestinal stress is just counter to ergogenic aid. It's not going to provide you any sort of performance benefit. If you've ever had like a pizza prior to going to the gym, which God, I hope you haven't, but if you have, it sounds awful, right? Like I've done burgers before and that's awful. I feel sluggish, I feel slowed down, I want to puke, especially when I'm approaching failure in a set. It's not the optimal state to be in, especially performance. We want to mitigate that as much as possible, so it's super important that we get digestion on point. Lastly, this is where your hormones are metabolized and neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and even norepinephrine are produced and synthesized, right? And even metabolized, right? This is where estrogen is going to be managed. This is where a lot of the neurotransmitters are going to be created from the microbia sent to the brain. A lot of mechanisms being overlooked here, but you get the point, right? If this isn't functioning normally, there's a lot of areas in your life that are going to, quite frankly, go down the shitter if your digestion is not on point.
So this is a weird part in the video. I totally forgot to mention why might digestive issues be an issue in the off season. Totally shooting this off the cuff, but typically when you eat more food in the off season, you are going to be presented with an opportunity to try different foods, and those different foods are sometimes going to present themselves as non-digestible, and you don't want to mess around with that. Also, in the off season, you are going to have the opportunity to probably eat out more often, and eating out can initiate some certainly bad digestive issues. So these things will compile onto the just caloric burden overall on your gastrointestinal system to create an environment where digestive issues are very common and in fact really encouraged just from the constant bombarding we're giving our gastrointestinal system from our stomach to our intestines. So it's really important that we care for and mitigate any of these things from going wrong while we are in the off season. These are the steps that I take to mitigate them.
So some red flags, quite simply said, we have a lot of them, and this is something that can be overperceived or underperceived. So we have to be very cautious of how we're looking at this and making sure that these things that we're approaching we're not looking at it on a short time scale, right? Like if one of these happens in a day, that's not much of a concern. But if you're waking up with these issues day after day, if you're feeling them every single day, that's okay. But like, just think reasonably, right? Like if you eat in the morning and you've eaten 4 meals and you're slightly more bloated than you were in the morning, like obviously that's quite normal and that's not a position to be worried about at all. But just be wary of things like GERD or acid reflux, so burping up acid. People are very familiar with that. Beware of burping or gas. Beware of bloating. Beware of food making you tired in general. So when you eat a meal, if you're exhausted afterwards, it's a really good sign that food in general has caused you a great deal of inflammation and thus just slowing you down and becoming sluggish. Stool inconsistency is a really big one. If you're shitting water one day and solid rocks the other day, you're experiencing a great deal of issues somewhere along the line. Just as well, if you're shitting liquid every day, that's not okay. You want somewhere in between where it's soft and sort of hard. There's a scale for this, but I won't get into in depth. Just make sure your stools are quite normal. Breakouts are another big one. If you have a ton of acne all of a sudden after eating a certain particular food, this happens a lot after cheat meals for some people. You go get a pizza or a hamburger, and maybe it was the dairy, maybe it was something else, but that food has triggered a massive reaction. I know for me that personally happens, and typically I get back-knee like a motherfucker after a cheat meal. So that is something to be cautious of, as well as yeast on your hands or feet. It sounds really weird, but that yeast overgrowth is from the gut typically, so you want to be cautious of this. The big one that people overlook a lot is water retention. If you eat something, and I'll use an example for myself. I used to be able to pound donuts for whatever reason. As the years have progressed, you start to develop food allergies in life. And so as my years have progressed, I've developed likely some food allergies, and I try to eat donuts now, and my chin will literally grow like 3 sizes from 2 donuts. Like my throat swells. Like that's a really good sign of food allergies, especially if you're starting to get cankles after eating a particular food. And it's not like there's a difference between binge eating, because yes, you're going to gain water in that way, but if you're just eating something and then all of a sudden you notice a very strange water retentive look from it, it's a very good indication that that thing is not the thing you should be eating. Meal timing and consistency is crucial here. You have some people who like to eat one meal, wait 6 hours, eat another meal, and then right before bed eat their last meal. What I prefer is you have every single meal planned out. So you're going to eat this meal, 3 hours later eat this meal, 3 hours later eat this meal, to the best of your abilities. Obviously there's going to be some variability, but keeping it around the same schedule every single day is going to be ideal. That consistency is a mechanism in which your body can learn. And there's this complex called the migrating motor complex, which is sort of this nerve impulse through your gut that pushes the food down into your large intestine from your small intestine, preventing bacterial overgrowth. It's very essential for healthy microbiota, and this goes amiss if food consistency, as far as timing is concerned, is wacky, and if there is just completely unpatternizable rhythms in your eating methodologies, you are going to struggle greatly with your digestion. As well, if you are eating close to bed, which is another thing that we are really fond of doing in America, you are going to cause this same very issue. At night, growth hormone triggers the migrating motor response, as well as some thyroid hormone, and you are going to run into an issue where if your food is still in your stomach, you're not going to be, 1, releasing as much growth hormone, but 2, that migrating motor complex isn't going to know what to do because your stomach is still full of food that hasn't even been digested yet. It's not going to have enough time to clear out your intestines. So try to avoid food prior to bed. I'm a big proponent of walking. I mention it in probably almost every video, especially after meals. This is very simple. Obviously, I've mentioned how it controls blood glucose via GLUT4 translocation upregulation, but independently of that, it increases gut motility. So the actual gravity is pulling the food down through your gut. Hey, who knew, right? And that is going to directly impact how you manage food. Instead of it just sitting crunched up in the seated position and fermenting in your gut, it's going to now be able to mobilize itself through your gut. And secondarily to that activity, upregulates certain enzymes that are digestive enzymes that will improve your digestibility of certain foods. This one is huge and probably the biggest reason people struggle in the off season. From what I've seen, they can't put down food, but when they put down food, usually their biggest meals are around their workout. They're super hyped up, they're on caffeine, they're going nuts. And when you're sympathetically driven like that, stress is big in your life. Stress can be perceived in multiple ways. It doesn't always have to be negative. When there's a great deal of stress, your gut is not going to be filled with blood. It's not going to be able to produce the enzymes needed to digest certain foods. You're going to run into a lot of issues, especially when the blood gets pulled away from the gut. You're leaving yourself in a very jeopardized position because that gut motility is just going to slow right down. Your body thinks it's in need of fight or flight, so it's going to put it all into the extremities and the skin, and perform actions with that blood instead of using it for digestion. And so if you're not calming down before you eat, breathing, taking time after your workout, realizing that it is essential that you chew your food, you calm down, you relax, and taking 20 to 30 bites per scoop of food, right? I'm very bad at this, I will admit, but you have to calm down before you eat. This will improve your digestion dramatically. I run into this so much. It's just the simplest thing is, hey, if you sit down to eat, turn everything off, like everything, breathe for 2 minutes. Deep breath in, deep breath out. You will drastically improve your digestion just from doing that. And I promise this is via the vagus nerve connection, and I've spoken about this in other videos, so please review other videos in the past that I have, but this will dramatically impact the way you digest food. It is probably one of the biggest lifestyle factors that is going to directly impact that. And another one to mention is caffeine. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with the stress thing, because caffeine is liquid adrenaline essentially, and it's going to induce a more stressed state. But that being said, you can mitigate this by lowering or even just completely removing your caffeine intake at certain times, especially in the off season. People bounce off caffeine. They're caffeine junkies and stimulant junkies because they're eating more food. They're a bit sluggish. Sometimes it's just nice to have that pre-workout before you go to the gym. But being in, like I said, this sympathetic dominant state all the time is not going to provide you any benefit. Short term, acutely, yes, you'll have some ergogenic aid, but over the long term, you're going to disrupt more processes within the body than you can really catch up with. This is the biggest part here, nutritional interventions. What can you do with your nutrition to improve digestion, appetite, and all that, especially in the off season? One, the very simplest thing is just remove the foods that you notice cause you issues. A lot of people are eating things day in, day out. They'll eat them, they'll get the sniffles. They'll eat them, they'll get that water retention. They'll eat them and they'll feel super bloated afterwards, or they just won't have an appetite after eating them. This is the key foundation to realizing that food is not what's going to work for you. That is a food allergy. You sniffling after you eat a food, that is a food allergy. Something in that meal did not agree with you, and you need to troubleshoot and figure out what that is and just remove it from the diet entirely for 20, 30 days. See what happens. Is your digestion improved? Then you know what the issue was. Move on to a different food group. Want to keep fiber pretty consistent in times of increased food intake. Likely the fiber intake is indirectly going to increase, and sometimes it increases too much, causing way too much fecal bulk. It causes gastrointestinal issues up the yin yang. Either you're having diarrhea or constipation, one of the two. It's not good, especially if you have low fiber. Too low of fiber, because a lot of people preach lowering your fiber in the off season, is going to cause these same exact issues. It's the concept of hormesis. There can't be too little, there can't be too much. So mitigating your fiber intake is super essential. Not many people even track their fiber intake. They get digestive issues, and it's like, dude, you're only eating 10 grams of fiber a day. Like, of course you're gonna have digestive issues. Is this even questionable? Like, duh. And some other people are like, yeah, sweet potatoes like all day, and they're eating like 50 to 60 grams of fiber. And on top of all their other food, it's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, you have digestive issues because this fiber is just bulking up in your gut and holding on all the water, and you are just like holding all this interstitial fluid right there in your gut. You're bloated. Of course, this makes sense. You remove the fiber, they're okay. Making sure your fiber intake is on point is really key. This one is sort of contradictory. Limiting fructose. A lot of people think fructose is great. Eat fruit. It's very micronutrient dense, so on and so forth, which sure it is. A lot of phytonutrients involved, so on and so forth, but a lot of people, actually most people have a fructose intolerance. It's just some people it's very severe, some people it's not so severe. Your gut is very unable to digest fructose, and especially your liver is very unable to process it. This is why people get fatty liver disease from overconsumption of fructose, which is in most sugary drinks and sugar these days, like table sugar and so on. It is very important that you moderate your sugar intake, that too, but your fructose intake directly. If you notice you're eating a fruit and then the next meal already comes around, but you're feeling awfully or bloated or gassy or burpy, likely you have a fructose intolerance, some capacity. So maybe you switch out the fruits, remove the fruits, do something with that, or just limit the intake of fruit in certain periods of your day when you're trying to push food heavily. So like after your workout, maybe that's not the time to be eating fruit in a large quantity. Maybe that's later in the evening, right? There's like such things as satiety ratings, and this is important too, because like you can eat 320 grams of like strawberries is 100 calories, while like you see 30 grams of rice is 100 calories. Like, you do the math, which one's going to be more conducive to a better appetite, right? Like the 30 grams of rice is obviously going to help you more than the 320 grams of fruit. So eating things that are lower in satiety, meaning they satiate you less, you're more hungry after eating them, really great. Really important for times when you're trying to push the food up. When you're trying to lower the food down, you're decreasing calories to lose body fat. Yes, those higher satiety foods are going to be great. Things like oranges, strawberries, spinach, amazing. But in times of where you're trying to push the food and push volume up, it's really important that you find those low satiety foods. Examples would be eating low fat French fries from the store instead of whole potatoes. Like, those two things are very different, even though they're the same sort of macronutrient profile. One's gonna help you a lot more in just getting more food down, and one's gonna help a lot less. This one is huge. Water intake around meal. Do not drink water 20 minutes prior to the meal, 20 minutes after the meal. It sounds like, why would that even matter? But you have digestive enzymes in your mouth, in your throat, in your esophagus, and in your stomach. As you drink water, you wash all those digestive enzymes away down into your stomach, and then you also neutralize the acid within your stomach. It's really important that you keep that acidity high around your meals, and that stomach and esophagus and mouth bacteria, or digestive enzymes, I should say, you want them to be very saturated in your mouth, so when you're eating that food, it's slowly digesting as it reaches your stomach. You'll notice dramatically if you don't. Like, the one food hack when you're dieting is pound water before you eat. Why? Because it does that exact thing. It slows gut motility and just the digestibility of your food. Cooking veggies to wither them is extremely important as well. So take 300 grams of spinach is about 100 calories of spinach. It's a big bowl of spinach. But if you put it into a pan, pour some water in the pan, or olive oil, or whatever you like to do, and put a lid over it and let it wither for 3 minutes, it's going to shrink down into the size of a palm. That whole big bowl of spinach will just go to the size of a palm. So if you can wither certain foods, spinach, kelp, there's a lot of them. Any sort of green carnivorous vegetable is going to be pretty witherable, even to some extent broccoli and stuff. Going to be really great options to eat large quantities of, but small volumes, if that makes sense. So you're still going to be able to hit your fiber intake and mitigate any overconsumption of vegetables, but do it in such a way that's not going to be filling you up drastically. And you just put that, if you cook 800 grams of spinach, you put that in every meal, you're good to go. Rice-based products are really great. The reason being is that they don't have very much fiber. So oatmeal is great, but it has a ton of fiber. Its digestive ability, I'm just making that word up, is really slow. So if you eat something that's close to it in rice, like rice, or we can take examples of noodles. Eating rice noodles instead of just plain noodles is going to be way easier to digest than whole actual noodles or whole wheat noodles. Same thing with bread, right? If you're eating whole wheat bread or Ezekiel bread, those have very high fiber contents, very high protein contents. Removing that and replacing with a rice-based bread or something similar is going to provide you so much more digestibility, as opposed to those other options that have more fiber and protein and fats that are going to cause those issues. Too many nuts is another big one. I see this all the time. Fats slow gut motility quite dramatically. They also slow digestive ability. And if you are over consuming fats, you're going to run into big issues. But when we look at what fats we're consuming, a lot of the times there are people that are not consuming necessarily too much fats, they're just consuming the wrong fats. And so everyone's in the off season, nut butter. I'm going to use so much nut butter. And then they use nut butter, and nuts are not a great source of nutrients. They're great. I should rephrase that. They are a great source of nutrient, but in a limited capacity. You only need 2 Brazil nuts to meet your micronutrients that you can get from Brazil nuts daily intake, right? You don't need much nuts to really provide you that much micronutrients. It takes a very small amount. When people are using 4 to 6 tablespoons of nut butters a day, you are going to run into digestive issues. You just will, trust me. People are allergic to peanut butters across the globe in some capacity. Everyone has a food allergy to peanuts. It's just what we've developed as a society, as we've evolved through the years and years and years. This has been viewed in studies, and there's a lot of data on it, and that suggests that maybe our food intake when we're children has affected this, so on and so forth. But whatever I'm saying is, you are going to be consuming too much nut butters, and that's going to cause massive issues. And you have all these companies pushing these flavored nut butters, which makes the problem so much worse. Reduce your nut butter intake dramatically, if not cut it out completely, which is what I recommend. And just consume raw nuts, like the 2 Brazil nuts you need a day, or the couple of almonds that help you with micronutrient intake. Those are great, but other than that, avoid them. Too much fats in general can cause these same issues. It's going to slow down gut motility. It's going to create it's going to be if you consume, let's say, 300 grams of rice and 6 ounces of chicken, and you dazzle that with a little bit of olive oil. It tastes great. It's really easy to eat. It gets down very easy. If you dazzle it with a lot of olive oil, okay, now it kind of feels gross. Now you'll notice 3 hours later, that's still sitting with you and it's really heavy in your gut. Okay, you want to make sure that you are doing things that are going to improve your digestion, not slow it down. Resistant starches are another big one. Resistant starches are when you cook something, let it cool, it forms resistant starches. These resistant starches are indigestible by us. They're going to slow down digestive ability. I keep making that word up a lot. They're gonna make shit really hard for you to move through, really. And I've noticed this myself. You know, in the past, what I've done is cook meals in the slow cooker, or sorry, not the slow cooker, the pressure cooker. I'd cook all my rice for like 3 days thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna prep it out, you know? I would do that, and then like by the third day I would start eating the rice that I had prepared, and I'm like, a lot of this is like hard, it doesn't taste great, and then I eat it, I'm like, man, this stuff is like making me really gassy, and it's like bloating me a lot. Like, what's going on? It's because those resistant starches formed over time. Those resistant starches aren't digestible. They're not great for your gut. Some capacity of them is great, but this thing happens in rice, in potatoes, and any starchy carbohydrate. You're going to experience the formation of resistant starches the longer you leave it in a refrigerated setting. So what I recommend is just prepping your food the day of as far as carbohydrates. That's what I do. I cook my meat weeks in advance, but I make sure that my carbohydrates are always prepared the day of. Get a slow cooker, get a rice cooker. These things help tremendously, and you say you don't have time to do that. Like, a rice cooker takes 10 minutes. You throw it in the morning, you go do your chores in the morning, like brush your teeth and shit, you come back down, it's all done. Like, it doesn't take much time, don't lie to yourself. Natural digestive enzymes are another huge one. You get these from kiwis, mangoes, pineapples, avocados even. Like, these are great. Things like pepsin and other digestive enzymes within these leptin, in these products are going to be super beneficial because you're not taking in a supplement, it's not down regulating your natural enzymatic production, it's just providing an enhancement via just food, right? The kiwi skin is a great source of pepsin, which is going to digest more protein. So if you eat more kiwis around your protein meals, you'll notice, hey, like, I'm digesting more food better, right? This comes into play though where I said fructose intolerance, right? This is a very individual. You have to figure out what's triggering your digestive issues, especially when you're pushing so much food, taking in so many different variety of sources. It's hard to really figure out that thing, and sometimes it's really worthwhile just dragging everything back to the basics and just eating the minimal effective food for your growth, and then adding in things again slowly to figure out what's triggering your issue. I know my protein intakes are quite high that I recommended in past videos, so this is a great one. If you are experiencing like digestive issues, you're pooping weird, your poop is really dark, it's very great to start with a lowering of your protein and see if that helps ameliorate any of the digestive issues you are experiencing. As in high protein intake, I'm sure we're all aware of this, will really fuck your digestion if you do it wrong. So it's important that you mitigate this via, let's look at my protein intake and all other obstacles prior to doing anything else. This is when we get into other things like supplementation. After we've checked all of these boxes, then we're like, okay, what can we do to supplement? As long as I'm getting my diet 100%, I've intervened everywhere I can. Let's hit the supplements. Supplement interventions. Betaine HCl plus pepsin is a great supplement and increases stomach acidity, especially as people age. Their stomach acidity very, very dramatically lowers at a precipitous decline. Getting this supplementation prior to meals, 5 minutes prior to meals, is going to dramatically help how you digest protein specifically. The acidity of your stomach is going to signal the more enzymatic processes to start producing, the enzymes to start producing. I'm just making up language. And these enzymes are going to be directly responsible for digesting protein, digesting carbohydrates, digesting fats, lipase, protease, all these different enzymes. And so if your stomach acidity is not great, one, you're not going to be able to break the food down for the enzymes to consume. Two, you're not going to have enzymes to consume the food that is broken down. So improving your acidity, and if you don't have the proper acidity, it's really easy to know. Usually experience like burping, bloating sort of things. But if you have like 8 ounces of water, I think it's actually 4 ounces of water, what they recommend, a tablespoon of baking soda, you drink that, you wait 5 minutes. If you burp, your stomach acidity is all right. If you don't burp, you got issues. So that's kind of how you want to look at it. You know, if that's kind of what I would do first, because a lot of the times when we're in the off season, we're eating a lot frequently, stomach acidity can kind of take a short decline. So it's really good to increase that, see if it ameliorates any of the issues, and likely it will. My digestive stack I take every morning and recommend my clients take is 10 grams of glutamine, 1 ounce of apple cider vinegar, 1 ounce of aloe vera juice, and 1 or you can find whatever supplemental form of it you want, but some sort of probiotic fiber is really great. Right away in the morning prior to anything else, you'll notice that increases your ability to digest food and just overall gut motility to clear out very well. Recommend everyone takes that right away in the morning. Body Tech Matt is a very great coach who I follow and does this as well. It has helped me dramatically in the past several weeks, and my clients have always improved their digestive systems rapidly with just the simple supplementation of these products. Digestive enzymes you're going to want to use sparingly. They work, yes, but if you use too much of them, they can actually downregulate your natural production of enzymes, just like as if we replace anything. It offsets hormesis, causing a bunch of issues. So don't use them a lot. If you're having a very tough day, okay, maybe supplement with them, but don't get it to be something that you're using every single day to ameliorate issues. You should really look at the deeper problems. And this is a video not touching on those deeper problems. That's a whole other series in itself, but this is a good start. Probiotics are another great source. Like I said, you can get them from food, but you can also get them from supplementation. The thing you have to be careful of is if you do have bad bacterial overgrowth and you take probiotics, what you're going to be doing is just supplying those bad bacteria with more tools to grow. You're going to be supplying them with more people to recruit. So it's sometimes not always a great thing to use. You really have to track down the source of your issue. If it is just a food intolerance, or maybe you just don't have enough bacteria in your stomach or in your digestive tract, okay, that might be a good product for you. But if it's truly like you have SIBO or IBS or some sort of gut dysbiosis, those probiotics are probably just going to make the issue worse, to be honest. The removal of estrogen modulators, so there's like natural supplements that modulate estrogen, but there's also unnatural ones for you super supplement users. Estrogen can very greatly impact gut motility and gut function. There's a large correlation with how the gut works with estrogen and its functions with the brain directly too. So just know that when you're changing values of estrogen, it's really going to fuck with digestion issues and overall assimilation of nutrients. And then as well, any medication that you're using that's either prescribed or self-prescribed can affect the way the gut works. For example, growth hormone usage can actually slow gut motility. That's why you see a lot of bodybuilders with that big gut. Their food is still in their gut because the assimilation of it is just not happening. It slows the ability for food and fecal mass to move through your guts and intestines. For example, the use of thyroxine or T4, T3 can actually impact the migrating motor complex. That alone is going to impact how food moves through your gut and the ability for bacteria to get backed up through your gut. So it's really important that you realize, hey, some prescription drugs are going to impact the way the gut functions and works. It's really important to look at the Merck index or something that would tell you or indicate, hey, this drug might impact the way my gut works. Things like SSRIs, things like ARBs, ACE inhibitors, really anything, right? Statins, they're going to impact the way your gut functions. So please review that information when you have a chance, or just hire a good coach like me, and I'll tell you all those mechanisms behind those things. In the next video, we are going to cover how and when to stop the fasting phase so you don't get too fat. No one wants that. And specifically, we're going to talk about when to stop. When is the time? Like, why is it important to stop in the purpose of stopping, right? So, really important topic because a lot of people are just like perma bulkers and they just like to be huge, but is that really good for your health and longevity? I don't know. So, stay tuned for that one. If you like this video, please click the like button, subscribe, and maybe even click the bell button. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you like the earrings. Hope you like the new angle. Deuces.